The cabin door clicked shut behind us, sealing out the crisp Alaskan night and the distant howl of wind across the glacier. My husband sat in his wheelchair by the window, silhouette dark against the moonlit snow outside. I stood there in my travel clothes, still smelling faintly of airplane recycled air and champagne from our small wedding reception 2 days ago, watching him watch the wilderness. We'd been married 72 hours. We'd been together 8 months. And in all that time, I'd never seen him stand. Until I woke at 2 a.m. and found him on his feet, staring out that same window like a man who'd never known the weight of a wheelchair at all. I'm 63 now. That was 34 years ago, and I still remember the exact pattern of the moonlight on the cabin floor, the way my heart stopped, the moment I realized that everything I thought I knew about the man I'd married was a carefully constructed lie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Sarah, and at 29, I'd resigned myself to being single. Not unhappily. I'd built a good life in Seattle. I owned a small bakery in Fremont, lived in a studio apartment that smelled perpetually of vanilla and brown butter, had friends who loved me and a father who was dying. That last part mattered more than anything else. Dad had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in March. By July, when I met David, the doctors were talking in terms of months, not years. Dad had always been my anchor. After Mom passed when I was 17, it had been just us. He'd worked 2 jobs to put me through culinary school. He'd been the first customer at my bakery. He'd taught me that love wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up, day after day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The cancer ate at him quickly, but what seemed to hurt him more was watching me alone. "Sarah," he'd said one evening in August, his hand thin and papery in mine, "I just want to know you'll be okay, that someone will be there for you." I downloaded the dating app that night, not because I believed in it, but because I couldn't bear the look in my father's eyes. David's profile was different from the others. His photos showed him in a wheelchair, his bio straightforward. "Car accident 3 years ago changed my mobility, but not who I am. Tech entrepreneur, terrible cook, looking for someone who sees people, not limitations." I almost swiped past, not because of the wheelchair, but because I was tired. Tired of disappointing first dates, tired of small talk, tired of pretending to be someone I wasn't. But something in his eyes in that photo made me pause. A kind of quiet strength I recognized because I'd seen it in my father. I swiped right. Our first date was at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. I'd gotten there early, anxious, rehearsing conversations in my head. Then David rolled in, 15 minutes late because the accessible entrance had been blocked, and the first thing he did was make a joke about it. No bitterness, no anger, just wry humor that put me immediately at ease. We talked for 4 hours. He told me about the accident, the year of physical therapy, the tech startup he'd founded 2 years before that was starting to really take off. I told him about my bakery, my father, my fear of losing the last person who truly knew me. He didn't offer platitudes. He just listened. When we left, he said, "I'd like to see you again. If you're interested." I was. Over the next weeks, I fell into something I hadn't expected. David was thoughtful in ways I'd forgotten men could be. He remembered that I hated cilantro and loved old jazz. He sent flowers to my bakery with notes that made my staff tease me. He video-called my father when I mentioned Dad was having a rough day, and they talked about football for an hour while I cried in my kitchen. The wheelchair became background noise. I learned the accessible routes around Seattle, the restaurants with ramps, the theaters with proper seating. I joined online support groups for partners of people with mobility challenges. I read articles about spinal cord injuries, about intimacy and adaptation, about building a life that looked different than planned but could still be full. By month 3, I knew I loved him. By month 5, when he asked me to move in with him, I said yes. His apartment was accessible, beautiful, overlooking Elliott Bay. We settled into routines. I'd wake early to open the bakery. He'd work from home on his laptop, building code and taking video calls. Evenings we'd cook together, him chopping vegetables while I kneaded bread dough, both of us moving around his kitchen that had been modified with lower counters and pull-out shelves. Dad's cancer progressed. By October, he was on hospice. David was there through all of it. He held my hand during the hard conversations with doctors. He made sure Dad's favorite foods were available even when he could barely eat. He never made it about himself or his limitations. One night in November, Dad pulled me aside after David had left the room. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice weak, "that man loves you for real. The kind of love that stays." "I know, Dad." "Marry him. Let me see you married, please." I'd been planning to wait, to give Dad time, to make sure David was ready. But Dad was running out of time, and when I told David what my father had asked, he didn't hesitate. "Let's do it," he said. "I've known for months that I want to marry you. Let's give your dad that gift." We planned a small wedding for early December. 30 people, all close friends and family, at a bed and breakfast in the San Juan Islands. Dad was there in a wheelchair of his own now, too weak to stand, but his eyes were bright as he walked me down the aisle. Or rather, as David's best man, Marcus, pushed Dad's wheelchair while I walked beside them. David waited at the end of the aisle in his own wheelchair, wearing a navy suit and the most brilliant smile I'd ever seen. When we exchanged vows, his hands shook as he held mine. "I promise to be your partner in everything," he said. "To face whatever comes together. To never let my limitations become ours." I believed every word. We honeymooned in Alaska. Dad passed away 3 days after our wedding, slipping away peacefully with the knowledge that I wasn't alone. The funeral was small, the grief enormous, and David held me through all of it. 2 weeks later, we flew to Anchorage. The cabin was his idea. He'd rented it online, a remote place near a glacier, accessible but isolated, perfect for healing. "We'd spend a week there," he said, "just the two of us, letting me grieve and rest." The first day was quiet. I cried a lot. David held me, let me talk about Dad, made me tea when I couldn't eat. We watched the northern lights from the window that night, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. I fell asleep on the couch around 10, exhausted from grief and travel. I woke at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. The cabin was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the large picture window that faced the glacier. I walked down the short hallway, still half asleep, and glanced into the main room. David was standing at the window. Not sitting, not transferring, standing. His back to me, hands in his pockets, weight balanced on both legs, staring out at the frozen landscape like a man who'd never known what it meant to be unable to walk. I froze in the hallway. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This had to be a dream, a grief-induced hallucination. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. He was still standing, and then he turned around. Our eyes met across the dark room. For one eternal second, neither of us moved. Then something crumbled in his expression, something that looked like relief and terror and resignation all at once. "Sarah," he said quietly. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "I can explain. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man I'd married, the man I'd spent 8 months learning to love in a wheelchair, the man I'd researched spinal cord injuries for, the man I'd rearranged my entire life around, was standing in front of me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You can walk," I finally whispered. It wasn't a question. "Yes, you've always been able to walk." "Yes." The cabin felt like it was tilting. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. "The accident, the 3 years, everything you told me." "The accident was real," he said quickly, taking a step toward me. I flinched back, and he stopped. "I was in a car crash 3 years ago. I did have injuries, but I recovered. I've been able to walk for 2.5 years. My knees buckled. I sank down right there in the hallway, my back against the wall, staring at this stranger who wore my husband's face. Why? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 100 times but now looked foreign, wrong. Everything was wrong. "Can I sit? Can we talk about this?" "You can apparently do whatever you want," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "You've been doing it all along." He moved slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. He didn't sit in his wheelchair, which suddenly looked like a prop, a costume piece from some elaborate theater production. He sat on the floor across from me, legs crossed. "My ex-wife," he started, and I almost laughed because of course there was more. "We were married for 4 years. When the accident happened, I was in the hospital for 2 months. fractured spine, broken pelvis, compound leg fractures. The doctor said I might never walk again. He paused, staring at his hands. Victoria stayed through the hospital stay, through the first surgery. But when I came home in a wheelchair, when the reality of long-term care set in, everything changed. She became distant, cold. I caught her cheating 6 months after the accident. When I confronted her, you know what she said? I didn't answer. Couldn't. She said she didn't sign up for this. That she married a successful entrepreneur, not a disabled man who needed help showering. That she was too young to be a caregiver. His voice was flat, factual, but I could hear the old pain underneath. She left me while I was still in physical therapy, took half of everything in the divorce and moved to California with her new boyfriend. I was devastated. Not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized she'd never really loved me. She'd loved the version of me that was useful to her. "So you lied to me," I said. My voice was shaking now. "You lied to every woman you dated. You made us all prove we weren't like her by making us commit to a life that didn't even exist." I recovered, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Against the odds, through a lot of therapy and work, I recovered. I could walk again. It was a miracle. But the experience with Victoria broke something in me. I realized I'd never know if someone loved me or for what I could provide. My money, my success, my able body. "So you decided to test people." I decided to find someone who would love me, even if I couldn't offer those things. Someone who would see me. Not my abilities or disabilities. Someone who would stay. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. "You put an entire fake profile on a dating app. You spent 8 months lying to me. You let me research spinal cord injuries. You let me join support groups. You met my dying father and let him believe he was leaving me with someone who needed me as much as I needed them." "I needed you," he said urgently. "I do need you. Sarah, these 8 months have been the realest thing in my life. You love me for who I am." "I don't know who you are," the words exploded out of me. "I know a character you played. I know a test subject in your sick experiment. I don't know you." "You do," he insisted. Everything else was real. My feelings for you, my respect for your father, my love for what you do, how we talk, how we fit together. The only lie was the wheelchair. The only lie? I was shaking now, fury replacing shock. "David, I spent 8 months preparing to be a caregiver. I researched accessible housing. I learned about adaptive equipment. I mentally prepared myself for a future that included medical appointments and insurance battles and people staring and 1,000 complications I was ready to face because I loved you. And you let me. You watched me do all of that, knowing it was unnecessary, and you never said a word. I was going to tell you." "When?" "Before the wedding." He looked down. "I swear, I was going to tell you before we got married. But then your dad got worse, and the wedding happened so fast, and he was so happy, and I couldn't take that away from him. Or you. I thought I'd tell you on the honeymoon that we'd have time to work through it. You thought I'd just forgive you? That I'd be okay with being tested and lied to? I thought you'd understand." I stood up abruptly. He started to stand too, then seemed to think better of it, staying on the floor. Submissive. Like even now he was playing a role. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. His hesitation was answer enough. "Marcus knows. He's known the whole time. He tried to talk me out of it, but I made him promise not to say anything. Your best man knew I was being lied to at my wedding." "Sarah, don't." I held up a hand. "I need to think. I need to be alone. I need you to not talk to me right now." I walked to the bedroom and locked the door. I heard him say my name once more, but I didn't respond. I sank onto the bed in the dark room and stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe, trying to understand how my entire life had become a lie in the span of 2 minutes. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to him move around the cabin, walking, always walking now, without the pretense. Every footstep was a knife. By morning, I'd made a decision. I packed my bag, called for a cab to the nearest town, booked a flight back to Seattle. David watched me from the doorway, his wheelchair sitting empty in the corner like an abandoned shell. "Please don't go," he said. "Please stay and let me make this right." "How?" I zipped my suitcase closed. How do you make this right, David? Do you go back to the wheelchair and we pretend you never walked? Do we start over with the truth? Do we rewind 8 months and you introduce yourself honestly? None of those things are possible. We start from here. Now. With complete honesty. I don't want honesty from you, I said. And I meant it. I want a time machine. I want my father back. I want the man I thought I married. None of which you can give me. The cab honked outside. I grabbed my bag. I love you, he said desperately. That was never a lie. I stopped at the door and looked back at him one last time. You tested me. You tested my love, my character, my commitment, and I apparently passed with flying colors. Congratulations. But here's the thing you didn't consider. I didn't sign up to love a test. I signed up to love a person, a real person. And I don't know if that's you or not. I left him standing there. The flight home was a blur. I went back to my apartment, which suddenly felt empty without David's things. Without David, I called in sick to the bakery, which was unlike me, but nothing felt right anymore. Marcus showed up on my doorstep that evening. He called me, Marcus said when I opened the door. He looked miserable. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I told him from the beginning this was wrong. I told him you deserved the truth, but you kept his secret. He's my best friend. I made a promise. I thought he'd tell you sooner. I really did. I never thought it would go this far. You stood next to him at our wedding. I know. He ran a hand over his face. I almost said something that day. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, I almost spoke up. But then I saw your dad's face, how happy he was, and I couldn't destroy that moment. I let him in because I needed answers, and David wasn't there to provide them. We talked for 2 hours. Marcus told me everything. How David had been broken after Victoria left. How he'd spiraled into depression and paranoia. How the wheelchair had started as a defense mechanism during therapy, a way to see who actually cared when he was vulnerable, and had somehow transformed into this elaborate test. He's not a bad person, Marcus said. He's just wounded. He wanted to know you'd love him even at his lowest. I would have, I whispered. That's what kills me. If he'd told me about Victoria, about his fears, I would have understood. I would have shown him he could trust me. But he didn't give me that chance. He made me prove myself to a scenario that didn't even exist. What are you going to do? I don't know. Marcus left me his number and a message to pass along. David was staying with him in Seattle, giving me space, waiting for me to decide what came next. I spent 2 weeks in limbo. I went to work, came home, existed in a fog of grief and anger and confusion. Dad was gone. My marriage was a lie. Everything I'd built my future on had crumbled. My therapist, Dr. Patel, whom I'd started seeing after Dad's diagnosis, helped me sort through the pieces. You're grieving multiple losses simultaneously, she said. Your father, the relationship you thought you had, your trust, all valid, all worthy of time. How do I forgive something like this? Do you want to forgive him? Did I? I turned the question over in my mind for days. The anger was still there, hot and justified. But underneath it, I found something else. Sadness for David, for whatever had broken inside him so thoroughly that he felt this was his only option. Grief for the relationship we could have had if he'd just been honest. And love. Damn it, I still loved him. Not the wheelchair, not the test, not the lie, but the man who'd stayed up with me while I cried about my father. The man who'd made me laugh with terrible puns. The man who'd listened when I talked about pastry techniques like they were the most fascinating thing in the world. That man had been real, even if the circumstances weren't. I told Dr. Patel, I want to understand why. Really understand. And then decide if there's anything left to save. I called David 3 weeks after Alaska. He answered on the first ring. I want to talk, I said. Not to reconcile, not to forgive, just to talk, on my terms. Anything, he said immediately. Whatever you need. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop neither of us frequented. He looked terrible. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same kind of pain I saw in my own mirror. He didn't offer excuses this time. He told me everything. The full story of Victoria's betrayal. the therapy he'd done and apparently needed more of. The moment he'd created the fake profile, telling himself it was just to test the waters, see if anyone would give him a chance, how it had spiraled from there. "I know it was wrong," he said. "I knew it was wrong the whole time. But I was so afraid of being hurt again that I convinced myself it was necessary. That finding someone who'd love me despite the wheelchair meant finding someone who'd love the real me. But that wasn't the real you either," I pointed out. "You were playing a role just as much as you thought Victoria was. You weren't vulnerable, you were performing vulnerability." He nodded slowly. "I see that now. My therapist has been helping me see that." "You're back in therapy?" "Started the day you left. Twice a week. I'm working through the trauma from the accident in Victoria, working on why I thought deception was the answer." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so deeply sorry. You deserved honesty from the start. Your father deserved to see you marry someone who was being real. I stole that from both of you, and I can never give it back." His taking responsibility without deflection cracked something in my chest. "I don't know if I can trust you again." "I know. I don't know if I want to try." "I understand. But I need to know something. If I'd said no when you proposed, would you have told me the truth then?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I want to say yes. I planned to say yes. But honestly, I don't know if I would have had the courage, and that's something I have to live with." His honesty about his own dishonesty was somehow what I needed to hear. Not promises he might not keep, but acknowledgement of his own failures. "I need time," I said finally. "I need space to figure out who I am without my father, without the relationship I thought we had. I need to grieve both those losses before I can even think about what comes next. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. And if you decide you're done, I'll accept that too." We didn't hug. Didn't touch. I walked away from that coffee shop no more certain than when I'd arrived, but with a strange sense of clarity. The path forward wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was understanding, processing, and eventual decision. I threw myself into work. The bakery became my refuge. I created new recipes, hired another baker, started teaching weekend classes. I went to therapy weekly. I joined a grief support group. I slowly, painfully, rebuilt myself. David respected my space. He didn't push, didn't show up uninvited, but once a week, I'd find something small, a card in the mail, with no message, just his signature, flowers delivered to the bakery with a note that said, "Thinking of you," a donation to the Pancreatic Cancer Research Foundation in my father's name. Small gestures, honest ones. 3 months after Alaska, I called him again. "I want to see proof you're actually doing the work." He didn't hesitate. He gave me his therapist's contact information with his permission for her to speak to me. Dr. Chen called me the next day. "I can't share specifics without David in the room," she said, "but I can tell you he's engaged in the process. He's facing difficult truths about himself. He has a long way to go, but he's committed." "Is he safe?" I asked. "Mentally? He's safe. He has support systems in place. And he genuinely wants to be better, not just to win you back, but because he recognizes the harm he's caused and wants to understand it." That mattered to me more than I expected. The next time David and I met, I had conditions. If we're going to try to rebuild anything, even friendship, it has to be different. Complete transparency. No secrets, no tests, no games. "Agreed. You go to therapy regularly, and I get to check in with Dr. Chen monthly." "Yes." We start completely over. We don't live together. We date honestly, like we should have from the beginning. And if at any point I feel you're being dishonest about anything, I walk away permanently. I understand. And we do couples therapy too, because even if we work through this, we need professional help processing it. Whatever it takes. We started slowly. Coffee once a week. Then dinner. Then longer conversations where he'd tell me about his therapy insights and I'd share my grief journey. It was awkward and painful and nothing like before, which was somehow exactly what we needed. I watched him walk. Really walk. For the first time in a context that wasn't shrouded in betrayal. He moved with a slight limp from the old injuries, a reminder that the accident had been real even if his recovery had been hidden. "Does it hurt?" I asked once. "Sometimes. Cold weather mostly. Scar tissue. He looked down at his legs. I hated these for so long. Hated that they worked when Victoria left me. Like if they'd just stayed broken, I could have blamed something concrete instead of facing that she never loved me enough. That's not about your legs. That's about her character. I know that now. 6 months into our careful rebuilding, I had a panic attack at the bakery. One of my regular customers came in with her elderly father in a wheelchair, and something about it triggered every buried emotion. I called David without thinking. He came. He held me in the back room while I cried, didn't try to fix it, just stayed. I'm terrified, I admitted. Terrified that I'm falling for you again, and you'll break me worse this time. I'm terrified too, he said quietly. Terrified I'll mess this up because I don't know how to do it right. But I'm trying, Sarah. I swear, I'm trying. It wasn't a promise of perfection, it was a promise of effort. And somehow, that felt more honest than any vow we'd made at our wedding. By our 1-year anniversary from that wedding, we still weren't living together. We were dating, slowly, carefully. We'd been through 9 months of couples therapy with Dr. Patel. We'd had hard conversations about boundaries, trust, and what rebuilding looked like. I'm not ready to renew our vows or anything, I told him one evening as we walked along the Seattle waterfront. But I'm not ready to divorce you either. Where does that leave us? In progress, I said. Growing, trying. He reached for my hand tentatively. I let him take it. His palm was warm, familiar despite everything. I want to show you something, he said, if you're open to it. He took me to a rehabilitation center the following week. Inside, I met a dozen people in various stages of recovery from spinal cord injuries. David introduced himself, not as a tech entrepreneur, but as a former patient and now a volunteer. I come here twice a week, he explained. I help people through the psychological side of recovery, especially those dealing with partners who've left or changed after their injuries. I watched him work with a young man named Chris, whose girlfriend had just broken up with him via text. David was gentle, honest about his own failures, but also hopeful in a way that felt earned. You helped me process by helping others? I asked after. Dr. Chen suggested it. She said I needed to transform my pain into purpose. This doesn't erase what I did to you, but it helps me understand why I can never do it again. That night, lying in bed in my apartment, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't a single moment. It wasn't a decision I made, and then it was done. It was a process, like grief, like healing. Some days I forgave him more than others. Some days the anger came back sharp and fresh, but slowly, gradually, the good days started to outnumber the bad. 18 months after Alaska, David asked if I wanted to try living together again. Different apartment, he said quickly. Fresh start. Not the place where we lived the lie. Somewhere we choose together. We found a loft in Ballard, equal distance from my bakery and his office. We moved in slowly, carefully, both of us hyper-aware of the significance. The first night there, he unpacked a box and pulled out his wheelchair. I'm donating this, he said, to the rehab center. Someone can actually use it. Wait. I stopped him. Can I say something first? He set it down, gave me his full attention. That wheelchair was a lie, but it taught me something true. It taught me that I'm capable of loving someone even when things are hard, that I'm strong enough to adapt, that my love isn't conditional on ease or perfection. I touched the armrest. I hate what you did. I hate that you tested me, but I don't hate what I learned about myself in the process. He wiped his eyes. Thank you for that, Grace. I'm not graceful. I'm just honest about the complexity. I stepped back. Okay, donate it. We built a life. Not the one we'd planned, but a real one. We went to therapy, individually and together. We fought sometimes, usually when my trust issues flared or his fear of abandonment spiked. But we fought with honesty, with rules we'd established about communication and respect. 2 years into our second attempt, I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, and the terror on David's face when I told him was almost comical. I'm going to be a terrible father, he said immediately. I'm going to mess this up like I messed up everything else. Probably sometimes, I agreed. And I'll mess up too. But we'll do it honestly, and we'll apologize when we're wrong, and we'll keep trying. Our daughter, Claire, was born on a rainy October morning. Dad had been gone almost 3 years by then, but I felt him in the delivery room somehow, in the way David held my hand, in the way he cried when he first held our baby. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, looking at her tiny face. "None of us deserve the grace we receive," I said. "We just try to be worthy of it." Claire is 32 now, about the age I was when everything fell apart and came back together. She knows the story. We told her when she was old enough to understand complexity and forgiveness, and the reality that people are rarely all good or all bad. Dad made a terrible choice, I explained when she was 15 and asking hard questions. He hurt me badly. But he also did the hard work to change, to be better, and I had to decide if that work was enough, if the man he became was someone I could trust. "And was he?" she'd asked. "Most days, yes. Some days I still struggle. But that's real love, honey. It's not the fairy tale where everything's perfect. It's choosing each other even when it's hard, being honest even when the truth costs you, and believing that people can grow." David's sitting across from me now on our deck in the San Juans, the same islands where we got married 34 years ago. We have a cabin here now, our retirement dream. Claire and her wife visit sometimes with our grandson. "What are you thinking about?" he asks, seeing me lost in memory. "Alaska," I say. "That cabin. That night." He winces slightly. "Even after all these years. Worst decision of my life." "Maybe," I allow. "But it led to some of the best ones too. You choosing therapy. Me choosing to stay. Us choosing honesty. You really forgave me," he says. It's not a question anymore, but he still sounds awed by it sometimes. I did, eventually, in pieces, over years. It wasn't fast or clean, but it was real. I reach across the table for his hand. It's aged now, spots and wrinkles, but still familiar. "And you earned it. That matters. You didn't just apologize, you changed. Every day I'm grateful you gave me that chance." The sun is setting over the water, painting the sky in colors Dad would have loved. I think about him often, wonder what he'd think of how it all turned out. I like to believe he'd be proud. Not of the deception, never that, but of the resilience, the forgiveness, the choice to see someone's potential, even through their failures. Love, I've learned, isn't about perfect beginnings. It's not even about perfect middles or endings. It's about two imperfect people choosing each other, again and again, with honesty and grace and the faith that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. David stands from the table, and I watch him walk to the railing, looking out at the water. He still has the slight limp. I've come to find it endearing, this physical reminder that we all carry our histories in our bodies, our hearts, our choices. He turns back to me, extends his hand. "Dance with me?" There's no music, but I take his hand anyway. We sway together on the deck, two people who've been broken and mended and broken again, but somehow still standing, still choosing each other, still grateful for second chances. Because in the end, that's what love is. Not a test, not a performance, just two people, honest and flawed, dancing in the fading light, grateful for every imperfect moment they get to share.